The storm howled across the frozen wastes of Tundra 9, its winds carrying crystals of ice that sparkled like diamonds in the pale light of the planet's twin suns. Dr. Nadia Petrova checked her suit's thermal readings for the third time in as many minutes. The temperature had dropped another 10 degrees, pushing the limits of even her advanced environmental gear. "Base, this is Petrova," she called into her comm. "I'm tracking unusual energy signatures about 2 kilometers east of my position. Requesting permission to investigate before the storm intensifies." Static crackled through her helmet speakers before a response came. "Negative, Doctor. Storm's getting worse. Return to base immediately." Nadia bit her lip, glancing at the peculiar readings on her scanner. Something about them seemed almost alive. After 6 months on this frozen rock studying microbial life forms, this could be the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. "Copy that, base. Beginning return trajectory." She switched off her comm with a guilty twist of her fingers. "Just a quick look," she told herself, adjusting her course toward the energy signature. The scientific possibilities outweighed the risk. Besides, she had 4 hours of oxygen remaining, and the base was only an hour's walk away. As she crested a ridge of ice, Nadia stopped dead in her tracks. Before her stretched a field of crystalline formations unlike anything she'd ever seen. They jutted from the ground at impossible angles, seeming to pulse with an inner light that defied the laws of physics. Her scanner went wild, detecting complex energy patterns that resembled neural activity. "Incredible," she breathed, reaching for her sample collection kit. That's when she saw it, a shimmer in the air, like heat waves rising from hot pavement, except this was no mirage. The shimmer coalesced into a form that both terrified and fascinated her. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body composed of what appeared to be living crystal. Light rippled through its translucent form in complex patterns, and where a face might be, there was a spiral of geometric shapes that shifted and changed like a kaleidoscope. Nadia's first instinct was to run, but her scientific training kept her rooted to the spot. The being made no aggressive moves. Instead, it seemed to be studying her with equal curiosity. She slowly raised her hands, palms forward, in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The crystalline entity tilted what she assumed was its head, the patterns within its form becoming more complex. It extended one limb, and Nadia noticed how the ice crystals in the air seemed to bend around it, creating a small pocket of calm in the raging storm. "Hello," she said softly, knowing her voice wouldn't carry through her helmet. "I'm Nadia. I come in peace." The words felt cliché, but what else could she say in a moment like this? The being, which she would later know as Xyrix, moved closer, its crystalline form catching and refracting the sunlight in mesmerizing ways. It reached out again, this time touching her helmet with what appeared to be a finger. The surface of her visor frosted over for a moment before clearing, and suddenly she could hear something, not with her ears, but in her mind. Curiosity, wonder, caution. The emotions weren't words exactly, but rather pure concepts that bloomed in her consciousness like flowers of thought. Nadia gasped, her scientific mind racing to understand the implications. The creature was telepathic, or at least capable of projecting emotional concepts directly into her mind. "Yes," she responded, focusing on her own feelings of wonder and peaceful intention. "I'm curious too. I'm a scientist, a student of life. Understanding, recognition, invitation." The crystal being gestured toward a formation that Nadia had initially taken for a natural structure. Now, looking more closely, she could see subtle patterns etched into its surface, not random, but deliberate. Writing? Art? Technology? The possibilities were endless. As she followed her strange new companion, Nadia's comm crackled to life. "Dr. Petrova, respond immediately. Your vital signs indicate elevated heart rate and adrenaline levels. Do you require assistance?" She knew she should answer, should report her discovery immediately, but something held her back. First contact situations were delicate, and she'd read enough history to know how quickly things could go wrong when bureaucracy and military interests got involved too early. "I'm fine, Base," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just got excited about some interesting ice formations. Heading back now." She muted her comm again, knowing she was violating at least a dozen protocols. Xyrix led her to what appeared to be a solid wall of ice. The being pressed its crystalline hand against the surface, and Nadia watched in amazement as the ice seemed to melt and reform, creating an opening. More complex thoughts filtered into her mind. Home, safety/knowledge share. She hesitated only briefly before following Xyrix through the opening. The passage beyond defied everything she thought she knew about planetary geology. The walls were covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with the same inner light as her guide, and the air was notably warmer than the surface. As they ventured deeper, Nadia realized she wasn't just making first contact with an alien being, she was about to become the first human to witness an entire alien civilization. The magnitude of the moment nearly overwhelmed her, but her scientific training kicked in. She activated her suit's recording systems, determined to document everything while respecting whatever boundaries her host might set. The passage opened into a vast chamber that took her breath away. Dozens of crystalline beings moved about what appeared to be a city carved from living crystal. Structures spiraled up into darkness, their surfaces alive with flowing patterns of light that she now recognized as communication. Xyrix guided her to a central platform, where several larger beings waited. Their forms were more complex, with multiple layers of crystalline structures that created depth and dimension Nadia hadn't thought possible. She could feel their consciousness brush against hers, more focused and controlled than Xyrix's initial contact. Welcome, evaluation, choice. The concept thoughts came with greater clarity now, accompanied by images and impressions that helped her understand. They were offering her a choice, to be the bridge between their worlds, but only if she proved worthy of their trust. Nadia straightened her spine, facing the alien council with determination. She knew that whatever happened next would change the course of human history forever. The question was, were both their species ready for that change? The crystalline council chamber hummed with energy as Nadia stood before the assembled elders. Their forms towered above her, intricate patterns of light flowing through their transparent bodies like rivers of thought. The largest of them, whom she would come to know as Vertex, moved forward. Danger, warning, necessity. The concepts flooded her mind with accompanying images that made her gasp. She saw vast networks of crystal beneath the planet's surface, glowing with power, but the glow was failing. Cracks appeared in her vision, spreading like spider webs through the underground city's foundation. "Your civilization is dying," Nadia whispered, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "The thermal network that keeps your cities stable is failing." Xyrix moved closer, its crystalline form dimming slightly in what she now recognized as concern. The images in Nadia's mind became clearer. The crystal beings had evolved to harness and redirect the planet's natural thermal energy, creating stable zones where they could build their civilization. But something was disrupting the delicate balance they'd maintained for millennia. Confirmation, helplessness, hope. The concept thoughts came with a new clarity, as if the council had collectively focused their ability to communicate with her. They showed her surface scans of recent human mining operations on the planet's northern continent, far from their current location. The vibrations from the mining equipment had created resonance patterns that interfered with their thermal network. "The mining colony," Nadia said, her scientific mind racing. "We had no idea. The geological surveys showed no signs of intelligent life, but we were looking for organic signatures, not crystalline ones." She reached for her data pad, fingers flying across the screen. "But if we can adjust the mining frequencies, create a dampening field." Interest, curiosity, caution. The council's thoughts interrupted her planning. They had tried to modify their own crystal technology to compensate, but the attempts had only accelerated the degradation. Their civilization faced extinction within a planetary cycle, less than 3 Earth months. Nadia felt the weight of history on her shoulders. She could alert the mining colony, have them shut down operations immediately, but that wouldn't solve the existing damage. And revealing the crystal being's existence would bring a flood of human attention, scientists, military, politicians, all wanting to study and exploit this discovery. There has to be another way, she said, both to herself and to her alien hosts. Show me everything you know about your thermal network. Every detail could be important. Xyrix led her through holographic displays created by intersecting crystal formations. The technology was unlike anything humans had developed, organic, fluid, yet incredibly precise. The thermal network wasn't just infrastructure, it was a living system that had evolved alongside the crystal beings themselves. As she studied the complex patterns, Nadia noticed something familiar. These energy signatures, they're similar to quantum entanglement patterns we've observed in our own experiments. Your entire civilization is built on quantum mechanics at a macro scale. Her excitement transmitted clearly to her hosts, causing ripples of light to cascade through the chamber. Xyrix's form brightened with what she interpreted as enthusiasm. Understanding, partnership, possibility. The council deliberated, their forms shifting and merging in what seemed to be their version of intense discussion. Finally, Vertex approached her again. Choice, risk, future. The images they shared showed her 2 paths, one where she left now, returned to her base with knowledge of their existence but no proof, allowing them to face their fate alone. The other path was more dangerous, a partnership between their species, combining human innovation with crystal technology to find a solution. But it would mean trusting her completely with their existence, and trusting her to manage human contact in a way that wouldn't destroy them. I understand the risk you're taking, Nadia said, meeting Vertex's geometric gaze. But I believe both our species have something to learn from each other. Let me help you, and in return, share your knowledge with us, carefully, gradually, in a way that benefits both our peoples. She removed her helmet, a gesture that made the crystal beings pulse with surprise. The air was thin but breathable, and she wanted them to see her face, to understand that she was making herself vulnerable too. On my world, we have a gesture that symbolizes trust and partnership, she said, extending her hand toward Vertex. We call it a handshake. The elder being studied her offered hand for a moment before extending its own crystalline appendage. When they touched, a spark of energy passed between them, and Nadia's mind filled with images more vivid than any before, the history of their species, their hopes for the future, their fears of extinction. Agreement, hope, beginning. The other council members moved forward, their forms creating a circle around Nadia and Vertex. The chamber filled with dancing lights as they communicated rapidly among themselves. Xyrix moved to Nadia's side, its presence reassuring. We need to work quickly, Nadia said, already formulating plans. I'll need to return to my base, gather equipment without raising suspicion. We'll need to find a way to redirect the mining operations' vibrations, maybe even use them to strengthen your network instead of weakening it. As she spoke, a tremor shook the chamber, sending cascades of crystal dust from the ceiling. The degradation was accelerating. What had taken millennia to build could be destroyed in months without intervention. Vertex released her hand, but the connection they'd formed remained, a faint awareness in the back of her mind. The elder being turned to address the council, and though Nadia couldn't understand the complex patterns of light, she felt the gravity of the moment. They were about to embark on something unprecedented, a secret collaboration between 2 radically different species, racing against time to prevent a catastrophe. But more than that, they were laying the groundwork for a future neither of their peoples had imagined possible. The human mining colony's control center buzzed with activity as Nadia carefully calibrated the new resonance dampeners. She'd spent 2 weeks convincing the colony's administration that her experimental geological stabilization system was necessary for their continued operations. If they only knew the true purpose behind her work. Dr. Petrova, called out Director Rahman from across the room, these energy readings are unlike anything we've seen before. Are you certain the equipment is functioning correctly? Nadia kept her expression neutral as she adjusted the settings. Perfectly normal for this type of planetary composition, Director. The crystalline structures in this region require special handling. It wasn't exactly a lie, just not the whole truth. A sudden alert blared through the facility, causing everyone to freeze. The planetary defense radar had detected something entering the atmosphere, something big. Multiple objects incoming, announced the security officer. Size and trajectory suggest they're not natural debris. Nadia's blood ran cold. Through her faint mental link with the crystal beings, established during her connection with Vertex, she felt a wave of terror that wasn't her own. Something was very wrong. Danger, ancient, return. The concept slammed into her mind with unprecedented force. She stumbled, catching herself against a console. The images that followed were horrifying, massive, dark creatures that consumed everything in their path, leaving only emptiness behind. Dr. Petrova? Director Rahman's voice seemed distant. Are you all right? I need to check something, she managed, rushing from the control center. As soon as she was alone, she activated the secure communication device Xyrix had helped her create. What's happening? What are those things? The response came not in words but in a stream of historical images. Eons ago, before the crystal beings had developed their current civilization, their world had faced another threat. Vast swarms of spacefaring predators that fed on energy itself, drawn to the quantum frequencies of developing crystalline life. The crystal beings had driven them away, but at a terrible cost. They return/feed, destroy. A new tremor shook the facility, different from the instabilities they'd been working to correct. This was impact tremor. They were landing. Nadia's comm crackled. All personnel, return to primary shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to primary shelter. She ignored the order, running instead toward her research vehicle. The crystal being city was defenseless with their thermal network failing. These creatures, these energy predators, must have sensed the weakening quantum fields. They were coming to feed. As she drove across the frozen landscape, more impacts shook the ground. Through breaks in the storm clouds, she caught glimpses of dark shapes descending from the sky, organic ships that moved like living things, their surfaces rippling with unnatural darkness. Her vehicle's sensors screamed warnings as one of the creatures passed overhead. All power systems fluctuated wildly as it drew energy from everything in its path. The vehicle stalled, its batteries completely drained. No, 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 Nadia muttered, trying to restart the engines. Nothing. She was still 5 kilometers from the Crystal City's entrance. Looking up through the windshield, she saw more dark shapes circling, like vultures preparing to feed. Coming, help, hurry. Xyrix's thoughts reached her, accompanied by the sensation of movement beneath the ice. The ground before her vehicle cracked open, revealing a crystalline transport vessel piloted by her friend. She grabbed her essential equipment and jumped aboard just as one of the Predator ships dove toward them. The crystal vessel plunged into the ice, tunneling through the planet's crust with impossible speed. Nadia clung to a formation that pulsed with reassuring light, her mind filled with Xyrix's rushed explanations. The predators hadn't come by chance. The degrading thermal network had sent quantum ripples through space, a dinner bell for these ancient enemies. Now both humanity's colony and the crystal civilization faced extinction. They emerged into the main city to find it transformed. The usually serene crystal structures now bristled with defensive formations, their surfaces hardened and opaque. The council chamber had become a war room, with Vertex and other elders coordinating their people's responses. Defense, adaptation, unity. The concepts came from Vertex as Nadia and Xyrix arrived. The crystal beings were already modifying their city's remaining power to create quantum barriers, but without the full thermal network, they couldn't maintain them for long. Wait, Nadia said, an idea forming. The mining colony's power grid, it's massive, designed to power operations across half the continent. If we could combine it with your quantum field technology. She didn't need to finish the thought. The council had already grasped her plan through their mental link. But it would mean revealing their existence to the human colony, risking everything they had tried to protect. Another impact rocked the city, closer this time. The predators were sensing the concentration of crystal life energy, homing in on their location. They were out of options. Vertex moved forward, its crystalline form now sharp and angular, ready for battle. Trust, necessity, action. I'll need to contact the colony, Nadia said, pulling out her comm unit. But they'll never believe me without proof. She looked at Xyrix, who had already guessed her next words. We need to show them. All of them. Now. As she entered the emergency broadcast code that would connect her to every comm unit in the colony, Nadia knew she was about to change the course of human history. But first, they had to survive. This is Dr. Nadia Petrova, she began, her voice steadied despite her racing heart. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but in the next few minutes, you're going to see proof. We are not alone on this planet, and right now, both our species face extinction unless we work together. Above the crystal city, the dark shapes descended, their hunger threatening to devour two civilizations. The real question was, could ancient enemies become allies fast enough to face an even greater threat? Director Ramon stood in the Crystal City's war chamber, his face a mask of contained awe as he watched crystalline beings flow around him like living light. Just 3 hours ago, his biggest concern had been meeting mining quotas. Now he was coordinating humanity's first joint defense operation with an alien civilization. The power grid modifications are at 80%, he reported, checking his tablet. But these creatures are draining energy faster than we can reroute it. We've lost contact with outposts 3 and 7. Nadia worked alongside Xyrix at a console made of living crystal, their movements synchronized through their mental link. The interface between human technology and crystal systems was crude but functional, a miracle of cross-species engineering assembled in mere hours. The quantum barrier is holding around the main city, she said, but look at these readings. She pointed to a pattern of dark spots on their merged sensor display. They're learning, adapting to our defenses. Each attack is more focused than the last. Pattern recognition memory. Vertex's thoughts reached everyone in the chamber. The crystal beings had developed new ways to share their telepathic communications with humans, not just emotions and images now, but complex concepts. The Elder's form shifted, creating a three-dimensional display of the Predator's attack patterns. They're not just random attacks, Lieutenant Park, the colony's security chief, observed. They're testing our defenses, looking for weaknesses. These things are intelligent. A massive impact shook the chamber, sending cascades of crystal dust from the ceiling. One of the Predator's ships had struck the quantum barrier directly, its dark mass visible through the crystalline walls as it tried to force its way through. Power fluctuation in Sector 7, called out a human technician. The barrier's weakening. Xyrix's form pulsed with determination as it interfaced with the city's defense systems. Nadia felt her friend's consciousness brush against hers, sharing a plan that was both brilliant and desperate. No, she said aloud, drawing everyone's attention. It's too dangerous. The resonance could tear you apart. Necessity, sacrifice, hope. What is it? Ramon demanded. What's the plan? Nadia turned to face the assembled humans and crystal beings. Xyrix suggests we use the crystal beings themselves to amplify the quantum barrier. They can link together, create a living shield that would synchronize with both their technology and ours. But the energy required. She couldn't finish the sentence. Would kill them, Park concluded grimly. Another impact rocked the city. Through the walls, they could see more dark shapes descending from the storm-filled sky. The predators were calling others of their kind, drawn by the promise of such concentrated energy. Vertex moved forward, its crystalline form shifting into something more complex, more beautiful than Nadia had ever seen. The elder being touched the wall, sending ripples of light through the entire city. Every crystal being felt the call. Unity, purpose, evolution. The concept thoughts came with a clarity that brought tears to Nadia's eyes. The crystal beings hadn't just been maintaining their thermal network all these millennia, they had been preparing for this moment, evolving into something that could bridge the gap between organic and crystalline life. They're not planning to sacrifice themselves, she realized aloud. They're planning to transform. Rahman looked between her and the crystal beings, confusion clear on his face. Transform into what? Before she could answer, every crystal being in the city began to move. Their forms flowed together like mercury, creating patterns of light and energy that defied comprehension. Xyrix turned to Nadia one last time. Trust, change, future. Then her friend's individual form dissolved, becoming part of something greater. The crystal beings were combining their consciousness into a single entity, their physical forms merging into a lattice of pure energy that encompassed the entire city. Incredible, breathed Rahman. The power readings are off the scale. Nadia rushed to the control interface. Quick! Channel everything we have into their network, all power from the mining grid, every joule of energy we can spare. The human technicians worked frantically, rerouting power from across the colony. The predator ships sensed the energy build up, their attacks becoming more frenzied. The quantum barrier flickered as the dark creatures slammed against it repeatedly. Through her fading mental link with the transformed crystal beings, Nadia felt something new emerging, not just a defensive shield, but a consciousness vast enough to encompass two different species' understanding of the universe. The crystal beings were becoming a bridge between worlds. The chamber filled with light so bright that the humans had to shield their eyes. When they could see again, the walls of the city had become transparent, showing them the battle raging outside. The predator ships hurled themselves against the quantum barrier, but now instead of merely blocking them, the barrier was changing them. They're not just defending, Park whispered in awe. They're trying to communicate with those things. Nadia watched as patterns of light played across the dark surfaces of the predator ships, like synapses firing in a vast neural network. The crystal beings were attempting something never before imagined, trying to evolve their ancient enemies just as they had evolved themselves. But would it be enough? And even if they succeeded, what would it mean for both their species? As the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance, Nadia realized that the true test of trust between humans and crystal beings was just beginning. The transformed crystal city pulsed with energy that defied human understanding. Where once there had been individual beings, now there existed a singular consciousness that stretched across the quantum barrier like a web of living light. Nadia stood at the merged control interface, her hands trembling as she monitored the power flow from the human colony's grid. Energy consumption is beyond sustainable levels, Rahman reported, his voice tight with concern. We can't maintain this output for more than an hour. Through the transparent walls, they watched as the predator ships continued their assault. But something had changed. The darkness that had seemed to consume light itself now rippled with faint patterns, echoing the crystalline communications. Look! Park pointed to one of the smaller ships. They're responding to the signal. The predator vessel had stopped its attack, hovering close to the quantum barrier. Its surface flickered with weak pulses of light, like someone learning to speak for the first time. The unified crystal consciousness reached out, their patterns becoming simpler, more primitive, meeting the predators at their level of understanding. Hunger, fear, change. The concepts flooded Nadia's mind with new clarity. Through her connection to what had once been Xyrix, she finally understood. They're not just predators, she gasped. They're lost. Their species evolved to feed on quantum energy, but they never developed the consciousness to understand what they were consuming. You mean they don't know they're killing intelligent life? Rahman asked, horrified. They're like animals following instinct, Nadia explained. But the crystal beings, they're trying to awaken something more in them. The same way they evolved from simple crystal formations into conscious beings. A massive tremor shook the city as the largest predator ship slammed against the barrier. Not all of them were ready to change. The combined power of human technology and crystal consciousness was straining to maintain the defense. Warning lights flashed across the control panels. Power reserves at 30%, called out a technician. Grid stability failing. Nadia felt a familiar presence touch her mind, Vertex, still individually recognizable within the unified consciousness. The elder being shared a plan that made her breath catch. They want to channel the entire thermal network, she announced. Not just to power the barrier, but to create a quantum resonance field that could reach every predator ship in the system. That much energy could tear the planet apart, Rahman protested. Or it could change everything, Nadia countered. She turned to face him, her eyes bright with determination. Director, I need you to trust me one more time. Rahman looked around the chamber at his fellow humans, scientists, engineers, and security officers who had already witnessed the impossible. After a long moment, he nodded. Do it. Nadia's fingers flew across the interface as she initiated the sequence. The crystal consciousness responded, their merged form beginning to pulse with a deep, resonant frequency. The very ice beneath their feet vibrated in harmony. The predator ships reacted immediately. The one that had been learning to communicate suddenly blazed with internal light, its dark surface becoming translucent. Others followed, the transformation spreading like a wave through their fleet. But the largest ship, the one that had led the attack, resisted. It gathered its remaining energy for one final assault on the barrier. Nadia felt the crystal consciousness prepare for the impact, their unified thoughts touching her mind one last time. Evolution, unity, transcendence. The collision never came. As the massive ship drove toward them, the transformed predators moved to intercept it. Their newly awakened consciousness reached out to their former leader, not with force but with understanding. The quantum resonance field amplified their connection, creating a bridge between all three species, human, crystal, and predator. For one breathtaking moment, Nadia felt her mind expand to encompass it all. She saw the predators' journey through space, their instinctive search for energy driven by fear of extinction. She experienced the crystal beings' eons of patient evolution, their preparation for this very moment. And she felt humanity's role, the spark that had brought them all together. The great ship's surface began to change, darkness giving way to light. Around them, the crystal city sang with triumph as the quantum field stabilized. The predators weren't just stopping their attack, they were joining the network, adding their own energy to maintain it. Hours later, as the transformed predator ships settled peacefully around the city, the crystal beings began to separate from their unified form. Individual consciousness emerged from the whole, forever changed but intact. Xyrix reformed beside Nadia, its crystalline structure now containing traces of the same translucent quality as the transformed predators. Friend, growth, beginning. I know, Nadia smiled, wiping tears from her eyes. This is just the beginning. Director Rahman cleared his throat. The mining colony will need to be completely redesigned. We'll have to find a way to coexist, to share resources without disrupting the quantum networks. We'll do more than that, Nadia said, watching as humans, crystal beings, and transformed predators began to interact, each trying to understand the others. We'll build something entirely new. Together. Above them, Tundra 9's twin suns broke through the storm clouds, their light creating rainbows as it passed through the crystalline structures. The Predator ships no longer appeared as dark shadows but as prismatic sculptures, their surfaces reflecting and refracting light in harmony with the city below. Nadia felt Xyrix's consciousness touch her mind one last time, sharing not just concepts but a vision of the future, a future where the boundaries between species dissolved, where fear gave way to understanding, and where the evolution of consciousness continued in ways none of them could predict. The alien girl had feared being devoured, but instead, she had helped birth a new form of life. As Nadia watched her transformed friend pulse with joy, she knew that the story of their three species was really just beginning.